For 3 decades, I dedicated myself to my children. I paid for their schooling, their weddings, and even their homes. Then, my daughter, Ashley, told me straight to my face that they did not want me at our Father's Day dinner. Little did she realize that the following day I would cancel the $180,000 mortgage check for her. Was this an act of vengeance? No, it was a moment of justice. I checked my reflection in the Metropolitan's glass door, straightening my tie for the last time. The navy suit I was wearing felt just right for the night's event, formal without being overly stuffy. Through the windows, I could see other families already seated, their wine glasses reflecting the warm light and their children laughing with them. It was Father's Day evening, precisely how it should have been. As I approached, the hostess greeted me with a smile. I said I was there for the Mitchell party of 4, the words carrying all the hope I had been holding onto for weeks. She led me to our table, which was set with a white tablecloth and fresh flowers. From there, I could see the downtown Spokane light starting to twinkle in the early evening. I carefully set the wrapped gifts beside my chair. Ashley's was heavier, a custom-made jewelry box with her initials engraved on it. Michael's was smaller but more expensive, a set of vintage cufflinks that had belonged to my own father. Both boxes were wrapped in silver paper that cost more than most people spent on lunch. At 6:30, I checked my phone twice before making myself stop. I knew they were busy and successful people. Ashley had her interior design business, and Michael had his consulting firm. I was proud of them, even when they were late. 7 o'clock came, and I heard the sound of high heels on the hardwood floor. Ashley appeared first, her blonde hair perfect. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Michael followed her, tugging on his collar and avoiding my gaze in a way that he had mastered since his childhood. Ashley's voice lacked any warmth as she settled into her chair, not even bothering to take off her coat. Michael mumbled something that might have been a greeting. I stood to hug them, but Ashley was already examining the menu. I commented on the salmon looking good, desperate to fill the silence that felt like a thick fog settling around our table. However, Ashley responded that they needed to talk. She put her menu down with the precision of someone placing a chess piece. Her green eyes, so much like her mother's but colder than Sarah's ever were fixed on mine. My stomach tightened. I asked what was on her mind. She exchanged a look with Michael, who suddenly became fascinated with his water glass. She explained that they had been discussing this and it was time for some honesty. That word felt like ice sliding down my spine. Other families around us continued their celebrations, their laughter creating a soundtrack that made our table feel like an isolated island of a brewing storm. Ashley's words fell with deliberate weight as she told me we were not needed there tonight. She added that they wanted to spend Father's Day with people who had actually accomplished something meaningful. The restaurant seemed to be spinning around me, but my world had completely stopped. The wrapped gifts beside my chair now felt like proof of my own foolishness. I told her I did not understand. She then asked what I, at 64 years old, had to show for my life besides a construction business that anyone could manage. Her laughter was sharp as broken glass. She said that they were building real careers and real lives and no longer needed to pretend. Michael shifted uncomfortably and suggested that perhaps they should not say anything else. She turned back to me, asking if we should spare my feelings. Ashley told me that I was a nice man, but she and Michael did not admire me. She said they did not want to spend their time with me. My hands found my water glass, gripping it to stop the trembling that had started deep inside of me. 34 years of bedtime stories, soccer practices, college tuition payments, and wedding costs all came down to this moment of casual cruelty. I carefully said that I needed to use the restroom, my voice sounding distant. I stood on legs that did not feel steady and walked across the restaurant, past tables filled with families who still loved each other, past the bar where couples were having intimate conversations, and into the men's room. There, the fluorescent lights revealed every line on my face in the mirror. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. I saw the man who had entered the restaurant wearing the same hopeful expression, but something had shifted in my eyes. Something harder was beginning to stir beneath the hurt. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my home office with a glass of scotch, surrounded by ghosts of a happier time. The drive home had been silent, not the comfortable quiet of contentment but the hollow absence of sound that follows devastation. Photos covered every surface, Ashley in her graduation cap, Michael holding his first business award, and family vacations where their smiles had seemed genuine. I wondered if I had imagined the love in those pictures. I questioned if every hug was a performance and every, "I love you, Dad," was a calculation. I pulled out the filing cabinet drawer marked, "Family Financial Records," and found a paper trail of 20 years of unconditional love, with cancelled checks, bank statements, and loan documents. I saw the numbers. Ashley's college was $87,000, her wedding was $180,000, and the down payment for her house was $120,000. Michael's MBA program cost $85,000, his business startup loan was $95,000, and the down payment on his house was $100,000. The numbers swam in front of me as I poured another drink. It was more than $500,000, not even including the smaller things like car payments, insurance premiums, and emergency loans that had become permanent gifts. I found a thank you card from Michael from 2019, his handwriting still boyish despite his 31 years. It said that I was the best dad ever and that he could not have done it without me. That card had sat on my desk for months, a treasure more valuable than any business contract. Now it felt like evidence in a fraud case. Ashley's antique jewelry box, the one I had given her for her 21st birthday, was sitting on my bookshelf, filled with my grandmother's pearls and my mother's engagement ring. She had left it there 3 years ago, claiming she wanted to keep it safe. I had never seen her wear any of the jewelry and figured she thought it was not fashionable enough for her social circle. The scotch burned, but not as much as the memories coming back. I remembered Ashley at 16, crying because she could not afford the prom dress she wanted. I had worked 3 weeks of overtime to buy it. I remembered Michael at 25, panicked about his business failing and calling me at midnight for a loan to save everything. I had liquidated part of my retirement fund the next morning to give it to him. Every sacrifice had felt like an act of love. Every check I had written was an investment in their happiness, success, and future. I had built my construction business from nothing, working 16-hour days, with bleeding knuckles and aching backs, all so they could have opportunities that I never had. I recalled Sarah's voice from memory, cautioning me not to spoil them too much and reminding me they needed to learn independence. I had kissed her on the forehead and promised I wouldn't, then written another check the next week. She had been gone for 5 years now, and I wondered what she would think of tonight's scene. I opened another photo album, this one from Ashley's wedding. She looked radiant in her $5,000 dress, standing in the $50,000 reception hall, surrounded by the $200 per plate dinner that I had insisted on paying for. I had told the wedding planner that nothing was too good for my little girl. Ashley had kissed my cheek and whispered her thanks for making it perfect. I wondered if that kiss had been real. I questioned if any of it had been real. The office grew quiet except for the ticking of my grandfather's clock and the distant hum of traffic. I closed the last photo album and walked to the window overlooking the city lights. Spokane was spread out below, with thousands of families tucked into their homes, most of them probably dealing with normal problems like homework, bedtimes, and mortgage payments. My reflection in the window showed a different man than the one who had entered this room 3 hours ago. I was still hurt, yes, but something else was becoming clear underneath the pain, something that felt dangerously like clarity. I had built them their lives. Maybe it was time to see how they would handle building their own. The city lights blurred slightly as I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. It was 11:30 at night, and my mind had never been clearer. The emotional fog that had clouded my thinking for years, maybe even decades, was finally lifting. I went back to my desk and began to organize the scattered documents into neat piles. One stack was for Ashley's financial dependencies, another for Michael's, and a third for joint obligations where I served as a guarantor or co-signer. The businessman in me, dormant during years of fatherly indulgence, had suddenly awakened with sharp focus. My gold pen, the one the construction workers' union had given me 20 years ago, felt substantial in my hand as I began making notes. I listed my financial connections to Ashley, credit cards guaranteed by me, a co-signed car loan, health insurance through my policy, and a cell phone on the family plan. The list grew longer as I worked through every financial connection I could remember. I then listed Michael's, a business loan guaranteed by me, a co-signed mortgage, and car insurance bundled with mine. I also made a note of the frequent emergency loans he received, averaging $3,000 monthly. I paused, staring at that last item. $3,000 a month in emergencies had become routine. I wondered when I had stopped questioning where the money went. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's number, knowing it would go to voicemail at this hour. I told Bill that I needed to discuss some changes to my financial arrangements and that it was urgent. My voice sounded different, even to me. It was less accommodating and more decisive. Next, I called my accountant, Margaret, and told her that I needed a comprehensive review of all my financial obligations, especially those involving my children, and that I needed it scheduled for this week. The scotch was forgotten as I worked, with adrenaline providing a better fuel than alcohol. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began to draft questions, wondering what would happen to Ashley's mortgage if I withdrew as a co-signer, whether Michael's business could survive without my backing, and how quickly various financial arrangements could be legally terminated. Each question felt like armor being forged to protect me from the emotional manipulation that had controlled my decisions for so long. I was not thinking about my children anymore. I was thinking of them as adults who had chosen to sever our emotional connection. If they wanted personal independence from me, they could have financial independence as well. I found myself talking to the empty room, a habit I had developed since Sarah's death. I reminded myself that I was not poor or unsuccessful. I had built a business that employed 47 people. I owned my house free and clear, had investments and savings, and was respected in the community. That realization struck me like cold water. I had allowed them to define my worth while simultaneously funding their lifestyles. They despised the man whose money made their social climbing possible. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet titled Financial Independence Project. The column headers were dependent, type of support, monthly cost, legal requirements for termination, and timeline for withdrawal. This was no longer emotional, it was strategic. My construction business had succeeded because I understood that relationships were transactional. Contractors delivered services and clients paid the agreed amount. Everyone honored their obligations. I had somehow forgotten that principle with Ashley and Michael. I had been providing services, financial support, emotional availability, and problem solving, while receiving nothing but contempt in return. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, but I felt more energetic than I had in years. Tomorrow would begin a new phase in my life, one where mutual respect was required for our relationship to continue. If they wanted to judge me as inadequate, they could do so without my financial assistance. I locked the documents in my safe, set my alarm for 7 a.m., and went upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, a single thought became perfectly clear. The next day, I would start making some calls. It was time for them to learn the true cost of independence. At 7:30 a.m. On Monday, I was back at my desk with coffee instead of scotch, dressed in casual clothes but alert and with a renewed sense of purpose. The emotional rawness from 2 nights ago had turned into a cold efficiency. My notepad was ready beside my computer, and my phone was within easy reach. I started by calling Ashley's bank, where I had co-signed her mortgage and served as a guarantor on 2 credit cards. I told the representative that I needed to verify my current obligations and review my options for account modifications. The representative was perhaps too helpful, letting me know that I was a guarantor on $127,000 in outstanding credit balances across 3 cards, plus a mortgage balance of $340,000. The minimum payments alone were about $3,200 monthly, though she noted that they typically saw higher payments from accounts of that caliber. I carefully wrote the numbers down. I then asked what would happen if I were to remove myself as a guarantor. She said that the primary account holders would need to qualify for the credit lines independently, and given their current debt-to-income ratios, that might be challenging. Michael's situation turned out to be even more enlightening. His so-called successful consulting business had $47,000 in credit card debt, all backed by my guarantees. His business loan, the one that had saved everything 2 years ago, still had a balance of $78,000, with payments that would continue for 6 more years. I asked his bank representative what his business's current revenue was. She explained that she could only speak to the account activity, but that the cash flow pattern suggested ongoing challenges. My accountant, Margaret, returned my call while I was reviewing insurance policies. I told her that I needed the exact numbers for every dollar I was committed to, every guarantee I had signed, and every policy where they were beneficiaries. I also needed to know the legal requirements for changing those arrangements. Her pause told me that she sensed the gravity behind my request. She asked if I was having family difficulties, noting that these kinds of changes could have significant implications. I told her I just needed the analysis and that I would explain when we met. By 10 a.m., my notepad contained a staggering list. Between mortgage guarantees, credit card backing, insurance premiums, car payments, and the emergency transfers that had become routine, I was supporting $472,000 in their obligations and providing roughly $8,000 monthly in various forms of assistance. The most shocking discovery came from Michael's car insurance company. His policy had lapsed 3 times in the past year due to a lack of payment. Each time, it was quietly reinstated when automatic charges were debited from my account. He had been driving uninsured for weeks at a time without even knowing it, protected only by my willingness to cover his oversights. Ashley's credit report, which I could access as a co-signer, revealed shopping patterns that would have impressed royalty, with 5-star restaurants, luxury boutiques, and spa treatments all charged to cards I guaranteed while she played the successful businesswoman. My lawyer, Bill, called back just before 11 a.m. He told me that I had sounded urgent the day before and asked what was going on. I told him that I needed to see him that day because I wanted to review every financial commitment I had made to my children and understand my options for restructuring those relationships. He said that restructuring family financial relationships could be complicated, with legal and tax consequences. I responded that the emotional considerations had already been settled and that I needed legal guidance on the practical matters. I asked if he could meet me at 2 p.m. I stared at my notes showing over $400,000 in financial exposure to 2 people who had publicly declared me beneath their respect. The irony was almost artistic. I reached for my phone to confirm the appointment but hesitated. Once I walked into Bill's office, I would be crossing a line from a hurt parent to a strategic adversary. There would be no pretending this was temporary anger or wounded pride. But as I looked around my office at the awards from the construction industry, the photos of buildings I had designed and built, and the evidence of a successful life they dismissed as meaningless, I realized the line had already been crossed. They had crossed it Sunday night at the Metropolitan. I dialed Bill's number. I told him that 2 p.m. worked perfectly and to bring the paperwork for financial power of attorney revocations because we had a lot of work to do. The manila folder felt substantial in my hands as I sat in my Mercedes outside Bill's office. I sat there with the engine running, going nowhere yet. 90 minutes of legal consultation had transformed my scattered anger into something far more dangerous, a systematic plan with teeth. I reviewed the documents Bill had prepared for me, power of attorney revocations, guarantee termination notices, and cosigner withdrawal forms. Each paper was a scalpel designed to sever the financial arteries that kept my children's lifestyles alive. The beauty of it was in its legality. Every signature was mine. Every account bore my name. Every guarantee existed at my discretion. I drove to Mitchell Construction, my company headquarters, where I had built an empire from nothing. The afternoon sun slanted through my executive office windows as I spread the legal papers across my mahogany desk. This space had witnessed million-dollar deals, complex negotiations, and strategic victories that had made me wealthy enough to spoil two ungrateful children for 3 decades. Now it would witness something else entirely. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Financial Independence Timeline. The methodology was pure business: identify dependencies, prioritize impact, and execute systematically. Ashley's credit cards would be first, as it would cause immediate embarrassment with minimal legal complexity. Michael's business credit line would be second, as it would cause professional humiliation to match his personal disappointment. The mortgage guarantees would come later when they understood that this was not temporary anger but a permanent restructuring. My accountant, Margaret, returned my call while I was organizing the account numbers. She said she had received my message earlier about restructuring some family accounts. I told her she was correct and that I needed her to set up a separate banking relationship for me, completely isolated from any accounts my children could access. I told her that from now on, all my financial decisions would go through her first, with no more direct payments, no more emergency transfers, and no more blank checks for family. Her pause told me she sensed the gravity of the situation. She asked if I was having difficulties with Ashley and Michael. I replied that it was quite the opposite and that I was having clarity. I leaned back in my leather chair, watching the traffic flow past my window. I saw regular people ending their regular workdays, unaware that a family war was beginning 6 floors above them. I said to myself that they had made it clear they did not need me in their lives, and I was simply honoring their wishes. Margaret asked if I was sure about this. I responded that I had never been more certain of anything. Once the call ended, I took out a yellow legal pad and began to outline what would be their formal introduction to the new reality. My plan was not to write an angry letter that would allow them to cast me as a villain, but a professional and deliberate business communication that would clearly define the new terms of our relationship. My grandfather clock chimed the half-hour, and I noted it was the perfect time. I knew Ashley was probably getting ready for some expensive dinner, certain her credit card would cover whatever she desired. Michael was likely at his office, acting like a successful entrepreneur, running his consulting business with money I had guaranteed. But all that was about to change. Tonight, I was changing all the rules. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number for Ashley's main credit card company. My finger lingered over the call button as I savored the last moments before their worlds began to fall apart. The irony was delicious. They had spent Sunday evening explaining how little I had accomplished and how embarrassed they were to be my children. By next Sunday, they would understand exactly how much their scorn had cost them. I glanced at my watch. It was 4:47 in the afternoon. It was the perfect time. As Ashley was likely getting ready for another expensive dinner she couldn't afford, I pressed the call button with the same unwavering steadiness I used to sign million-dollar construction contracts. The customer service representative was cheerful and professional, completely unaware that she was about to help me dismantle my daughter's financial life. I gave her the account information and told her I needed to remove my guarantee. She confirmed I was the primary guarantor for Ashley, and when she asked for the reason, I simply said it was due to personal financial restructuring, adding that the account holder would now need to qualify independently. For 23 years, I had covered Ashley's overspending, designer clothes, luxury vacations, and restaurant bills that exceeded most families' weekly grocery budgets. All of these were charged to the cards I guaranteed while she maintained the illusion of independence. I thought to myself that now we would see how she managed her lifestyle. The representative informed me that the change would be immediate, and the primary cardholder's credit limit would be reduced to whatever she could qualify for on her own. Any balance over that limit would require immediate payment. I responded that that was exactly the point. My satisfaction must have been audible, as the representative paused slightly before continuing with the termination process. Within a few minutes, Ashley's main financial lifeline was gone. The account that had supported her social climbing for over 20 years was no longer available. I immediately called Michael's business credit line. The process was identical, the professional efficiency the same, and the result was just as devastating. His consulting business, which was running on my support, would find its credit frozen by the end of the business day. The banker confirmed that the account closure meant any outstanding payments would be returned and no new charges could be processed. He suggested that the primary business owner be notified immediately, but I knew that Michael would figure it out soon enough. Between calls, I instructed my assistant, Linda, to hold any calls from my children. I told her to inform Ashley and Michael that I would be in meetings all week, to take their messages, but that I would not be returning them. Linda, who had worked for me for 15 years and had witnessed me spoiling my children into entitled adults, simply nodded. She asked if there was anything else, and I told her to call me before sending either of them up if they showed up at the office. I also asked her to keep a detailed record of all interactions. By 5:15, I had cancelled 3 of Ashley's credit cards and Michael's business line of credit. The methodical destruction felt more controlled than simple anger, and more permanent than a shouting match. This was a business decision, a matter of cause and effect, action and consequence, a natural order they had somehow never learned. I was reaching for my phone to cancel Ashley's car insurance when a text message from her popped up on the screen. It read that something was wrong with her credit card, that the restaurant had told her it was cancelled and that it had to be a mistake. She ended the text by telling me to call her as soon as possible. I read the message twice, picturing the scene, Ashley at some expensive restaurant, her card declined, her face flushing with embarrassment as other diners looked on. The entitled princess was discovering that her kingdom was built on sand. I put the phone face down on my desk without replying. A productive 30 minutes passed in silence. I had cancelled Ashley's auto insurance, a policy she had never paid for but had assumed would always exist. I had also removed Michael from our family cell phone plan, a service he had enjoyed for free for more than 10 years while building his own business. My phone was silent, as I had disabled the ringer, but I could see the screen lighting up repeatedly with incoming calls, from Ashley, then Michael, and then Ashley again. The panic had begun. I allowed myself to listen to one voicemail from Michael. His voice had a tremor I had never heard before, the sound of a man watching his safety net disappear in real time. He was asking what was going on, saying that his business account was frozen, and that the bank had told him I had cancelled the guarantee. He insisted there had to be some mistake, telling me his payroll process was the next day and that he had vendor payments due. He ended by telling me to call him back immediately. His desperation was like music to my ears. For years, Michael had treated our conversations as if they were inconvenient interruptions to his busy schedule. Now, urgency dripped from every word. Ashley's voicemail carried a different tone, demanding instead of pleading. She was still convinced she could simply order me to fix what she viewed as a problem, failing to realize it was an act of justice. She said that the situation was not funny and that her insurance company had told her policy was cancelled. She told me that her phone service was suspended and that I needed to fix it right away because she had a reputation to maintain and this was humiliating. The word reputation defined her existence. Everything Ashley did was calculated for social impact. Every choice was measured by how it would appear to her circle of equally shallow friends. The thought of her reputation crumbling brought a smile to my face that I had not felt in years. I continued working through my list, canceling Michael's business insurance and then terminating Ashley's health insurance policy, which I had maintained since her divorce. Each phone call felt like removing tumors that had been draining my life force for decades. The intercom buzzed, and Linda's voice carried a hint of warning. She told me that Ashley was here and that she seemed upset. Through my office window, the city sparkled with rush-hour lights. I pictured normal families heading home to their normal problems. Below me, I knew Ashley was probably pacing in the lobby, her designer heels clicking against the marble floors I had paid to install when I built this building. I straightened my tie and told Linda to send her up, but to call security immediately if she raised her voice or became disrespectful. I carefully arranged the cancellation confirmations on my desk where Ashley would see them the moment she walked in, proof of a systematic dismantling and evidence that this was not an emotional reaction but a strategic plan. I wanted her to understand that she was not facing the indulgent father she had manipulated for 34 years but the businessman who had built an empire through calculated decisions. The elevator dinged in the hallway, and Ashley burst through my office door as if she owned the building. In a way, I knew she believed she did, as she had always assumed that everything I had built and achieved was partially hers by birthright. Despite her obvious crisis, her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her designer dress probably cost more than most people earned in a week, and her jewelry caught the office lights with an expensive sparkle. All of it had been purchased with my money, maintained through my generosity, and was about to become something she could no longer afford. She didn't sit down and demanded that I fix this immediately. She did not acknowledge the documents on my desk or seem to grasp that the power dynamic had shifted completely. She asked if I had any idea how embarrassing this was, and then told me that her card had been declined at Meridian in front of the Hartwell Foundation board. She stressed that these were important people. I leaned back in my chair, studying her as if I was seeing her for the first time, and I thought to myself that she wanted to talk about embarrassment, like the embarrassment of the Father's Day dinner. Her jaw tightened, but she continued with the same sense of entitlement she had had since childhood. She told me that she was sorry if they had hurt my feelings, but that this was an extreme reaction. She said that I couldn't just cut off her accounts because of one dinner conversation. I picked up the stack of credit card cancellation confirmations, letting the papers rustle in the silence. It had been 30 years of conversations and 30 years of me apologizing for their behavior. But that was no longer the case. For the first time since she had walked in, she seemed to notice the documents on my desk. Her eyes widened as she recognized the bank letterheads, account numbers, and official termination notices. She asked what all of this was. I told her that it was her introduction to independence, and since she had said she did not need me in my life, I was simply honoring her request. Her composed facade cracked as she realized that this was not a tantrum she could manage, but a systematic restructuring of our entire relationship. She finally sat down in the chair across from my desk, her movements less certain. She said that maybe they had been too harsh on Sunday. But I finished her thought, asking if she thought I couldn't expect her to support herself, succeed without my money, and live within her actual means instead of mine. I saw the tears appear. I recognized them as practice tears, ones I had seen countless times over the past 3 decades. She then said that they never asked to be born and that I owed them this, because family takes care of family. The word family tasted bitter to me. I asked her when she had last treated me like family, or when Michael had. I asked when either of them had last called just to ask how I was doing or had invited me somewhere without needing money. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. We both knew the answer. I then gestured toward my office walls, which were covered with photos from construction sites, award ceremonies, and community events, a lifetime of achievement they had dismissed as meaningless. I told her that family does not humiliate each other in public restaurants, nor does it treat their father like an ATM with legs. Her tears dried up quickly when she realized they were not working. Her face hardened into an ugly and familiar expression, one she had worn as a teenager when she was denied something she wanted. She then asked if I was cutting them off completely over one stupid dinner. I corrected her, saying it was over 34 years of taking everything and giving nothing back but contempt. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She told me that if I wanted to play games, fine. She said that Michael was right about me and that I was just a pathetic old man trying to buy love. She ended with congratulations, telling me that I had just lost the only family I had left. She stormed toward the door, her designer heels striking the hardwood floors like gunshots. At the threshold, she turned back with venom in her voice and said not to expect them to come crawling back when I changed my mind because some bridges stay burned once they are burned. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. I sat in the sudden silence and then opened my desk drawer and took out a thicker file labeled Phase 2. Ashley was wrong about one thing, I had no intention of changing my mind. Some bridges needed to be burned. The next morning, the sun streamed through my office windows as I opened the file. Ashley's parting words had done something I had not expected. They had eliminated the last traces of guilt from my conscience. I realized that when my own daughter called me pathetic for building the empire that funded her lifestyle, the gloves had to come off permanently. I spread the documents across my desk as if I were a general planning a final assault. Mortgage guarantees, health insurance policies, trust funds, and country club memberships, every financial thread that connected me to their lives was there, ready to be severed with surgical precision. My first call was to Pacific Northwest Bank, where I held the mortgage guarantees for both of their homes. I told the banker that I needed to terminate my guarantees on their accounts immediately. The banker's voice carried a professional concern as she told me that those were substantial guarantees and that the primary borrowers would need to requalify independently. She noted that given their current debt-to-income ratios, that might be challenging. I simply told her that it was their problem now. I signed the termination forms while we talked, with each signature feeling like cutting anchor lines from a sinking ship. Within 30 days, Ashley and Michael would face foreclosure proceedings if they could not secure independent financing. Given their credit card debt and spending habits, that seemed unlikely. Next, I addressed the health insurance policy that covered Ashley's entire family. Her children, my grandchildren, would lose their coverage at midnight unless she found an alternative arrangement. The irony of it all was perfect. The woman who had criticized my lack of meaningful accomplishments would now be scrambling to replace the benefits I had provided without fanfare for years. During the third call, I told my banker that I wanted to restructure the education trust funds I had established for my grandchildren. Then, I corrected myself, saying to freeze them completely because the beneficiaries were no longer eligible. The college funds I had built for my grandchildren over years of monthly contributions would remain untouched but inaccessible. I decided to let Ashley and Michael explain to their own children why Grandpa's meaningless construction business could no longer support their educational dreams. It took only 5 minutes to cancel the country club memberships. Ashley especially valued her membership at Fairway Hills, not for the golf she rarely played, but for the social and business networking opportunities. She had built her interior design reputation largely through the relationships she had cultivated in that clubhouse. Now, with my cancellation, those relationships were severed. By noon, I had dismantled 30 years of financial support in less than 4 hours. Each phone call felt more controlled than anger and more permanent than shouting. This was mathematics, a simple matter of cause and effect, action and consequence. I then drafted formal notification letters explaining each change. I wrote them in the same professional tone I used for business correspondence, with no emotion or accusations, just facts. I wrote that due to a recent reassessment of my financial obligations, the following arrangements would be terminated immediately. Linda buzzed through the intercom as I sealed the last certified envelope, informing me that I had received 47 calls from Ashley and 23 from Michael. She asked if she should continue taking messages, and I told her to forward everything to voicemail for the next week because they would have plenty to discuss among themselves. I handed her the stack of certified letters. Each one was a precision strike designed to teach them a lesson that 30 years of indulgence had failed to convey. I told her to send them out that afternoon and to clear my calendar for the next week, as I had a feeling I would need to focus on family business. My phone immediately started buzzing with an unknown number, probably Michael calling from his wife's phone, thinking he could circumvent my assistant's screening. I watched it vibrate against my desk without answering. By 3 o'clock, my voicemail contained a symphony of panic. I had 47 messages from Ashley, 23 from Michael, and now calls from numbers I didn't recognize, their spouses, probably trying to reach me through alternative channels. I allowed myself the indulgence of listening to the progression of their desperation. Ashley's first message, recorded around noon, still had traces of her usual entitlement. She said that she did not know what game I was playing, but that the mortgage company had called about our guarantee being cancelled and that I needed to fix it immediately. By message number 12, her tone had shifted to begging. She said that she needed me to call her back and that the insurance company had told her that their coverage ended tonight. She ended by telling me that the children needed their medications and asking what I wanted from them. Michael's evolution was even more revealing. His early messages focused on business concerns, payroll issues, vendor payments, and professional embarrassment. But by afternoon, the personal cost became clear. He said that he had to tell his wife, Sarah, everything and that she was crying. He said that the kids were asking why they might have to move schools and that he knew they had hurt me, but that his children did not deserve this. The desperation in his voice was music to my ears. For 20 years, Michael had treated our conversations as interruptions to his busy schedule. Now his carefully constructed life was crumbling, and I was the most important person in his world. My sister, Margaret, called around 2:30, clearly recruited as a mediator. She told me that whatever Ashley and Michael had done, this was extreme and that they were family. I calmly asked her what they had said about me on Sunday night and if they thought I was pathetic. I then asked her to tell me more about family if they were so embarrassed to call me their father. The silence that followed told me that she was beginning to understand. Margaret had watched me spoil my children for decades and had probably wondered why they never seemed grateful. Now she was getting a glimpse of what lay beneath their polite surface. She told me that they were panicking and that Ashley had called 3 lawyers that day. She said they had all told her that I had every legal right to withdraw my financial support. I responded by telling her that of course I did, because it was my money and I had earned it. I said that I could stop sharing it whenever I chose. By 4 o'clock, I had learned through Linda's careful screening that they had contacted my business partners and had tried to reach me through professional channels. Tom Richards from the contractors union called, clearly uncomfortable with his role as a messenger. He said that he did not know what was going on with my family, but that Ashley had contacted him, asking if he could talk to me, and that she seemed pretty desperate. I asked him if she had told him what she had said to me on Father's Day and if she had mentioned that she thought my life's work was meaningless. His uncomfortable silence spoke volumes. He said that he did not get involved in family business. I replied that neither did I anymore. The most revealing call came from Michael's wife, Sarah, a woman I genuinely liked despite her husband's weaknesses. Her voice shook as she left a message. She said that she did not know what Michael and Ashley had said to me, but that the children were scared. She added that Michael had finally told her about all the money I had been providing and that she had no idea they were so dependent. She told me that she was embarrassed, but that I should not punish the grandchildren for their father's mistakes. Hearing Sarah's humiliation crystallized something for me. These were not just financial arrangements I was canceling. These were enabling structures that had prevented my children from becoming functional adults. Michael's wife had not even known that their lifestyle was funded by my generosity. I wondered what kind of marriage was built on such deception. Linda buzzed through the intercom at 5:30. She told me that both of my children were in the lobby and that they had brought their spouses. She added that security said they refused to leave until they saw me. I checked my watch and told Linda to tell security to give them until 6 o'clock, and after that to escort them out. At 5:45, I descended to the marble lobby of my building like a CEO meeting with failed contractors. Ashley and Michael sat on the leather chairs with their spouses, looking smaller and more desperate than I had ever seen them. The elegant corporate setting emphasized the power dynamic. This was my territory, my building, and my rules. Ashley stood as I approached, her designer clothes wrinkled from stress, her usually perfect makeup smudged. Beside her, Michael looked pale and defeated, while their spouses watched nervously from the sidelines. Ashley's voice had a tremor I had never heard before as she thanked me for seeing them. She said that they needed to talk about what had happened on Sunday night. I remained standing, maintaining the advantage of height and authority. I asked them what about it. Michael said that they had realized they had made mistakes and that families forgive each other. He said that they wanted to work it out, with his words tumbling out like a rehearsed speech. Their coordinated approach revealed the calculation behind their regret. This was not spontaneous remorse, but a strategic attempt to restore their financial lifeline. I quietly asked Ashley what she had meant when she said that I had never accomplished anything meaningful. Her eyes darted to Michael, then back to me. She said that she was just upset and that people say things they do not mean when they are emotional. She told me that I knew she did not mean it. I responded by telling her that I had been emotional, too, when I cancelled her credit cards, when I terminated her mortgage guarantees, and when I froze the grandchildren's college funds. I said that I guessed we all do things we do not mean when we are upset. Michael's wife, Sarah, stepped forward, with tears streaming down her face. She told me that she understood my hurt, but to please think about the children because they did not understand why their grandfather suddenly did not love them anymore. I responded that I did love them. I added that that was why I was teaching their parents the value of financial responsibility, something I should have done 30 years ago. Ashley's mask began to slip, and frustration crept into her voice. She asked me to just tell them what I wanted them to do to fix this. She asked if I wanted an apology and that if so, fine, they would apologize. She asked if I wanted them to admit they were wrong, to which she said they were wrong. She then asked what else I needed. The insincerity was breathtaking. She was apologizing to my wallet, not to me. I asked Ashley honestly that if I restored all of her financial support right now, would she invite me to dinner next Sunday? I asked if she would call just to ask how I was doing and if she would treat me with basic respect. Her hesitation was answer enough. Even then, facing financial ruin, she could not pretend to have a genuine affection for the man who had funded her lifestyle for over 3 decades. She told me that it was not fair. I responded that what was not fair was taking everything and giving nothing back except contempt. I straightened my jacket and checked my watch. I told them that they had until Friday to make arrangements for their mortgages, and that their health insurance would expire at midnight tonight. I also told them that their country club memberships were already cancelled. Michael stepped forward desperately, telling me that they could change and be better and to just give them another chance. I told him that I had given him 34 years of chances and that I had given him everything I had to give. In return, he had given me humiliation in a public restaurant and the knowledge that he was embarrassed to call me his father. I turned toward the elevator, but Ashley's voice stopped me. She told me that I would regret this when I was old and sick and alone and not to come crying to them. She ended by calling me a pathetic old fool and told me that I would die alone. I paused at the elevator button, her words confirming everything I had realized about her character. Even when facing a financial catastrophe, her true nature emerged as vindictive, entitled, and incapable of genuine remorse. As the elevator doors opened, I turned back with a slight smile. I told Ashley that I would rather die alone with my dignity than live surrounded by people who despised me but loved my money. The doors closed on their stunned faces. 6 weeks later, I was sitting on my back patio watching the sunset paint Spokane's spring landscape in shades of gold and amber. The cherry trees I had planted when Ashley was born were in full bloom, their branches heavy with pink blossoms that drifted across my lawn like confetti celebrating a life reclaimed. I heard a small voice say, "Uncle Robert, can you help me with my science project?" It was 8-year-old Emma from next door, who bounded over the fence with a face bright with the kind of genuine affection I had waited 30 years to receive from my own grandchildren. I asked her what we were building this time, and she said a volcano. She added that her mom said I knew about construction stuff and that I could help her make it really explode. Her enthusiasm was infectious. For the past month, Emma and her siblings had adopted me as their honorary grandfather, bringing me drawings, asking for help with their homework, and inviting me to their school plays. Their parents, the Hendersons, had become close friends, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. Tom Henderson joined us on the patio with 2 beers and observed that I seemed different lately, happier and more relaxed. I replied that I had learned the difference between being loved and being used, and that the difference was profound. These neighbors appreciated small kindnesses, like help with moving furniture, advice on home repairs, and listening ears during family struggles. They offered the same in return, creating genuine relationships built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. My new will, which had been signed 3 weeks ago, reflected my changed priorities. The bulk of my estate would fund scholarships for children whose parents could not afford college, kids who might appreciate educational opportunities more than my own grandchildren had. The remainder would go to friends like the Hendersons and to my longtime employees at Mitchell Construction, people who had shown me loyalty and respect over the years. Linda had mentioned that Ashley and Michael were slowly adapting to their new reality. Ashley had moved to a modest apartment and was working longer hours, actually earning her own income instead of spending mine. Michael had downsized his business and was learning to operate within genuine profit margins rather than guaranteed credit lines. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, but no guilt either. Natural consequences were teaching them lessons that 30 years of indulgence had failed to convey. Sometimes, love means letting people fall so they can learn to stand on their own. Emma tugged at my sleeve and asked why I didn't have kids who visited me, since her mom said I was the nicest man in the whole neighborhood. The question could have been painful, but surrounded by a chosen family that appreciated my presence, it felt more like validation than loss. I told her that some families were born, but some families were made, and that I preferred the ones that were made with love instead of obligation. As evening deepened and the Henderson family headed home, I remained on my patio with a cup of coffee, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. A small hand pressed something into mine. Emma had returned with a dandelion she had picked from my lawn. She told me that it was for me because I was always nice to them and that I made the best pancakes on Saturday mornings. I accepted the flower with a genuine warmth, thinking about the twisted path that had led me to this moment of peace. I had waited 30 years for appreciation from the wrong people, pouring love and money into relationships that gave nothing back except demands for more. The dandelion was worth more than every expensive gift I had bought for Ashley and Michael combined, because it came from a genuine affection rather than a financial obligation. As Emma skipped back to her house, I settled deeper into my chair and smiled at the stars. Sometimes the family you choose is the only family you need. Sometimes justice comes not through revenge, but through the simple act of refusing to enable selfishness any longer. For the first time in decades, I was exactly where I belonged. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.